The stars shimmered in the vast emptiness of space as the Imperial fleet made its way toward Earth. An enormous armada of warships, their dark hulls gleaming in the cold light of distant stars, sliced through the blackness of the universe. This was no ordinary fleet. The ships were colossal, towering metallic giants designed for one purpose: domination. Led by Admiral Varrock, a seasoned general of the Galactic Empire, the fleet was a terrifying force. Varrock had led countless campaigns across the galaxy, and none had ever failed. He had conquered planets, obliterated civilizations, and crushed any who dared to resist the Empire. But Earth, this tiny, insignificant world, was different. It had caught the Empire's eye, and it was now marked for destruction. The Admiral stood at the command center of his flagship, the Imperium. His sharp eyes scanned the holographic map in front of him, showing the final approach to Earth. The humans, primitive as they were, had no idea what was coming. Varrock's fleet had already annihilated multiple alien civilizations in the past, and he was certain that Earth would fall just as easily. Earth's defenses were nothing compared to the might of the Imperial fleet. "Prepare the fleet," Varrock commanded, his voice cold and unwavering. His officers, standing at attention, began relaying the orders. The fleet would descend upon Earth like a storm, and nothing would survive. The humans, from their primitive point of view, had their own defenses, a collection of outdated military technologies and a few attempts at space travel. But Varrock had already studied them thoroughly. The humans had no real understanding of the power that the Empire wielded. They thought their nuclear weapons and a few fighter jets could defend them, but the Empire's forces were far beyond anything they could imagine. As the fleet drew closer to Earth, the human governments were already in turmoil. News reports flashed across screens worldwide, but most dismissed them as fake or exaggerated. No one could have imagined the devastation that was about to unfold. The Earth's leaders were still debating how to deal with the alien threat, unaware that their time was running out. Meanwhile, Earth's greatest minds were scrambling to find any way to fight back. In a dimly lit underground lab, the world's top scientists worked tirelessly, but they knew the odds were slim. They had been preparing for such an invasion, but the technology they had was still rudimentary compared to the vast power of the Imperial fleet. The first warning came when Earth's radar systems picked up the massive ships entering the solar system. The message was sent to every military leader, every government, every agency. But by then, it was too late. The Imperial fleet was already closing in on Earth's outer defenses. The skies above Earth darkened as the fleet's enormous warships entered the atmosphere, casting shadows over the planet. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy, ready to strike. Earth's first line of defense, a series of satellite-based missile defense systems, fired off in a desperate attempt to intercept the alien ships, but the missiles barely made it halfway before they were shot down by the fleet's advanced shield systems. In Washington, D.C., the president stared at the live footage on the screen in disbelief. "What are we going to do?" he whispered to his advisors. The alien ships were descending on the cities, and there was no plan, no strategy that could stop them. His military commanders were advising him to activate the emergency protocols, but everyone knew the truth. Earth stood no chance. Across the world, similar scenes were unfolding. In London, Paris, Moscow, and Beijing, leaders scrambled to make decisions, but all attempts to organize a global defense fell apart. The Imperial fleet had arrived, and Earth was defenseless. At that moment, the first blast rang out. A huge emerald-colored beam shot down from one of the alien ships, obliterating a major military base in the United States. The explosion rocked the ground, sending shockwaves through the city. A cloud of smoke and dust billowed into the air, blocking out the sun for miles around. People screamed and ran in all directions as the first attack sent the world into chaos. Cities fell silent as alarms blared, signaling the beginning of the end. The Imperial fleet had arrived, and Earth was under siege. The alien ships hovered above the Earth, their enormous forms casting long shadows over the landscape. Varrock's voice echoed through the comm system, his words reaching every corner of the globe. "This is your last chance, humans. Surrender now, and your destruction will be swift. Resist, and you will face annihilation." No response came. The world was paralyzed, too stunned to react. As Earth's people watched in horror, the first wave of alien soldiers began their descent. The ships opened their massive hangar bays, and alien warriors clad in gleaming armor began to pour out. They were the best of the Empire's forces, trained in the art of war and ready to crush any resistance. On the ground, military units scrambled to respond. The sky was filled with fighter jets and anti-aircraft missiles, but they were no match for the alien invaders. As the first human defenses were obliterated, it became clear that the Empire had underestimated one thing: the resilience of the human spirit. Admiral Varrock watched from his command center as his forces began their landing. He smirked. Earth would fall as easily as the others before it. But something was stirring beneath the surface of this primitive world. He couldn't know it yet. But the battle was far from over. The invasion had begun. The fate of Earth was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the humans would not go down without a fight. The morning sky over Earth's major cities was suddenly disrupted by a series of powerful explosions. In the blink of an eye, the quiet calm of a typical day vanished, replaced by a terrifying roar that shook the ground. It was as though the world itself had been struck by lightning, but instead of nature's fury, it was the overwhelming might of an alien empire. The first wave of Imperial warships had arrived. From above, they looked like nothing Earth had ever seen. Giant ships covered in dark, sleek metal, each one big enough to block out the sun. They hovered over Earth's major cities, their engines humming like the growls of a beast preparing to pounce. Earth's people had no warning, no time to prepare for such an attack. In New York City, the roar of explosions echoed through the streets, sending clouds of debris into the air. People screamed and ran for cover as the sky turned an eerie shade of green. Below, the mighty ships began firing their weapons, releasing beams of energy that cut through the buildings like a hot knife through butter. The city's famous skyline was reduced to rubble in moments. In a control center miles away from the city's heart, General David Keller, one of Earth's top military commanders, watched the screens in disbelief. His fingers trembled on the command console as he tried to make sense of what was happening. "How are they doing this?" he muttered under his breath. The technology that the Imperial fleet used was far beyond anything Earth had ever encountered. Nothing in their arsenal could even scratch the surface of these alien warships. "What are your orders, General?" A voice beside him cut through the panic. It was Lieutenant Catherine Myers, his most trusted officer. David turned to face her, his expression grim. "All units are to mobilize," he commanded. "Activate the defense satellites, every available. Fighter, scramble them. We've got to slow them down." The lieutenant hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "General, what if it's too late? What if we're not strong enough?" David glanced back at the screen, where the destruction was unfolding in real time. "We fight, that's all we can do." But deep down, even he wasn't sure if it was enough. In the skies above, the alien warships unleashed wave after wave of assault, obliterating any defense they encountered. Earth's fighter jets launched into the air, their engines roaring, as they climbed toward the alien invaders. But it was like sending flies against a storm. The human fighters were no match for the advanced shields and weaponry of the Imperial fleet. The first fighter squadron that tried to intercept was obliterated before they even reached their targets. The alien ships fired energy blasts that instantly disintegrated anything in their path. One by one, the Earth fighters exploded in midair, their pilots having no time to react or evade the incoming onslaught. Back on the ground, chaos erupted as civilians fled the streets, desperate to escape the devastating onslaught from above. Traffic ground to a halt as people abandoned their vehicles and ran toward the underground bunkers. Sirens wailed as emergency services scrambled to respond, but it was clear that nothing would stop the alien invaders now. Across the world, the same scenario played out. Paris, London, Beijing, and Moscow, all of Earth's greatest cities, were being decimated by the invading fleet. The sheer scale of the destruction was mind-boggling. Entire city blocks were wiped off the map in seconds. The Imperial fleet had sent thousands of ships, each one carrying weapons powerful enough to reduce the most advanced human technology to dust. Back at the Earth's command center, the general paced restlessly. sweat beading on his forehead. His eyes never left the screen as he watched the destruction unfold. "What is the enemy's next move?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The Imperial fleet's attack was relentless, precise, and methodical. Lieutenant Myers approached him once again, a report in hand. "General, we've intercepted communications from their fleet. It looks like they're not just here to destroy. They want to conquer," David finished for her, his voice heavy with realization. "This is no ordinary attack. They're here for Earth. They won't stop until we're all gone." "We need more time," Myers insisted, gripping his arm. "We need to regroup. Our forces can't go up against these ships alone." David's gaze hardened as he scanned the view of the battlefield. It was becoming clear that humanity's defense would have to come from an unexpected source. He had always known Earth was vulnerable in space warfare, but he never imagined it would happen so soon. Back in space, the Imperial fleet moved with deadly precision. They had deployed a series of advanced ground troops that began descending from the skies. These were not your typical foot soldiers. They were fully armored, equipped with energy rifles, and prepared for brutal combat. The first waves of alien troops began landing outside major cities, immediately establishing control over strategic areas. They worked in perfect unison, their every movement synchronized and calculated. There was no room for error, no sign of hesitation. As the first group of soldiers landed outside a major military base in the United States, they began their assault. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that cut through the base's defenses. The human soldiers stationed there fought valiantly, but it was clear they were outclassed. Even the most advanced Earth weaponry could not penetrate the alien armor. It was as if their enemies were invincible. In a final attempt to stave off defeat, General Keller issued the order to launch their last resort weapon, a series of devastating nuclear missiles aimed at the alien fleet. But as the missiles were released from their silos and shot toward the sky, the alien warships opened fire with an advanced countermeasure, intercepting the nuclear warheads and destroying them mid-flight. The devastation was total, and Earth's last hope for retaliation was extinguished in an instant. "Commander, we've lost contact with the Southern Defense Base," Lieutenant Myers reported, her voice trembling. "The entire region has been taken." David's face turned pale, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "We can't stop them. We're outmatched." The room fell into a heavy silence, but David knew deep down that the battle was far from over. Earth was still standing. The invasion was brutal, and the losses were catastrophic. But humanity had something the Empire had yet to understand. A fight for survival had just begun, and Earth's greatest strength was yet to be revealed. As the Imperial fleet continued its destruction across the globe, Earth's leaders met in secret, deep beneath the ground in a secure command center. The once proud cities of Earth lay in ruins, smoldering from the unrelenting barrage from the alien invaders. People were terrified, fleeing to underground shelters and distant rural areas in a desperate attempt to survive. But in the heart of this global chaos, a different kind of battle was taking place. Away from the front lines, humanity's brightest minds were coming together in a desperate bid to save their planet. In top-secret underground laboratories, scientists and engineers who had been working on advanced technologies for years now found themselves facing an unimaginable challenge. They had to find a way to fight back against the invaders, quickly. Dr. Emily Carter, a leading scientist in energy weapon development, stood in front of a large screen in one of these underground labs. Her brow furrowed as she reviewed the data. She knew they had made huge strides in weapon technology over the years, but it wasn't enough to defend against the Imperial fleet. "We need something more," she said, half to herself. "Something that can level the playing field." Nearby, her colleague, Dr. Mark Dawson, was frantically typing commands into a computer terminal. He was one of the world's foremost experts in quantum physics, and his knowledge of advanced energy systems had earned him a place on this top-secret project. "We've been working with these energy weapons for months, but it's not enough to break their shields. We need to disrupt their systems from the inside." Emily's eyes widened. "That's it. We can't just fight them head-on. We need to find a way to bypass their defenses, To hit them where it hurts. We need to breach their shields. Mark turned to her with a spark of understanding in his eyes. We have the technology. We've been working on quantum tunneling for years. If we can tap into that, we might have a way to break through their defenses. They quickly gathered a team of specialists, each of them working tirelessly in the next few hours, pushing the limits of science and engineering to their maximum. They knew that Earth's survival depended on them. Meanwhile, above them, the Imperial fleet rained destruction down on their cities, showing no signs of slowing. Elsewhere, General David Keller stood in front of a war room table surrounded by his senior officers. He had heard about the underground labs working on advanced weaponry, but he was growing increasingly skeptical. How long until we have something we can use? He asked, frustration in his voice. We're working as fast as we can, General, Lieutenant Myers replied, trying to stay optimistic. The scientists are close, but it's going to take time. We don't have that much time. David leaned over the table, his face hardened with determination. Then we need to hold on. Buy them time. We can't let the Empire take over this planet without a fight. At that moment, a military officer burst into the room, his face pale. General, the Imperial fleet has deployed ground forces to the southern hemisphere. We've lost contact with our bases in Africa and South America. They're advancing fast. David's eyes narrowed. The Empire's tactics were brutal, and they were moving with a speed that made Earth's forces look like they were standing still. But David refused to back down. We've prepared for this, he said, his voice strong. We've been training for years to defend this planet. Now, it's time to show the aliens what humanity is made of. Back at the underground labs, the team of scientists had made a breakthrough. Dr. Carter stood in front of a large screen as the new weapon prototype powered up. It's working, she said, her voice filled with awe. We've created a quantum pulse cannon. This should be able to breach their shields. Mark stood next to her, his face lit by the glow of the screen. If this works, it'll disrupt the energy shields of their ships, allowing us to target their core systems. We might finally have a way to fight back. The weapon, a massive cannon powered by the latest quantum energy technology, hummed to life. They had designed it to generate a pulse capable of bypassing the alien ship's advanced shields. It was risky. No one knew if it would work, but it was their best chance. Now we need to test it, Emily said, her voice steady, though her hands shook slightly. We've only got one shot at this. In the distance, Earth's defenders, military, units stationed across the globe, prepared for an all-out assault on the advancing Imperial forces. They had to buy the scientists more time to complete their work, even if it meant sacrificing everything. David was at the front of the action, leading a squadron of Earth's elite forces in a desperate battle against the alien soldiers. His team fought bravely, using every trick in the book to slow the Empire's march. But every victory came at a heavy cost. The enemy was relentless, and the humans' resistance was being pushed to its limits. Hold the line, David shouted, as another wave of alien troops stormed their position. We can't let them get through. But just as it seemed the tide would turn in favor of the invaders, a new hope emerged from the depths of Earth's defenses. In the underground laboratories, the quantum pulse cannon was ready for its first test. General Keller received the message from the lab with a sense of cautious optimism. It's time, he muttered, before speaking to his officers. Prepare for the launch. We need to hit them hard, and we need to do it now. The cannon was activated, and the pulse shot out into space, tearing through the air with incredible force. It was aimed directly at one of the alien ships, a massive dreadnought that had been leading the charge. As the pulse made contact with the ship's energy shields, there was a flash of light so bright that it momentarily blinded anyone who looked directly at it. For a moment, there was silence. The Imperial ship seemed to hover in place, its shield glowing brightly as if struggling to contain the energy. Then, with a loud, deafening explosion, the shield collapsed and the dreadnought was struck with a devastating blow. The human forces on the ground cheered, watching as the alien ship began to fall from the sky, engulfed in flames. Earth's first real victory had arrived, and the hope that had seemed so distant now seemed within reach. We've done it, Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with disbelief. We've pierced their defenses. General Keller stood on the battlefield watching the alien dreadnought fall. It was only one ship, but it was a start. He clenched his fists. This is only the beginning. We're not done yet. The day after Earth's first victory over the Imperial fleet, a sense of cautious optimism filled the air. The destruction of the alien dreadnought had sent shockwaves across the planet, but the battle was far from over. The Imperial fleet had suffered a heavy blow, but it was still a powerful force, and Earth's forces were far from ready to face the full wrath of the Empire. General David Keller stood before a large map of Earth, surrounded by military commanders, strategists, and the scientific team that had developed the quantum pulse cannon. The battle against the aliens had taken a heavy toll, but the destruction of the alien warship had given humanity a glimpse of hope. "We've just made them bleed," David said, his voice low but filled with determination. "But we need to strike again, and we need to strike fast. The Empire won't rest until they've wiped us out." "We've got a limited window," said Colonel Marcus Trent, one of David's most trusted officers. "We're not sure how long it will take for the Empire to regroup. They'll send in reinforcements. We have to keep up the pressure." David nodded. "We've got a plan. The alien forces are scattered, but they're concentrated in key locations around the globe. If we can hit them hard and fast, we might be able to cripple their command structure." The generals and strategists quickly began formulating a plan, but time was running out. The Imperial fleet was still in orbit, and the alien ground forces were regrouping for another assault. Earth's forces needed to act quickly. In a small underground bunker in New York, Lieutenant Catherine Myers was coordinating with the world's top military leaders. The battle had escalated, and the stakes had never been higher. But the previous day's victory had lit a spark of hope, and Catherine was determined not to let it die out. "General, we've received word from the European Command," Lieutenant Myers said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "The Imperial forces are pushing toward our last remaining strongholds in Africa and Asia. They're closing in on key cities." David glanced at the map on the wall. The Empire was relentless, pushing forward with terrifying speed. But humanity had something the Empire didn't: unity. Across the world, armies from every nation had come together, putting aside old differences, to defend their home. It was humanity's greatest strength, and David knew they would need it more than ever in the coming days. "We need to make our move now," David said, his voice firm. "We've shown them that we can hurt them. We need to keep the pressure on. No more waiting." Across the globe, the sound of battle was constant. The alien forces were everywhere, wreaking havoc on Earth's cities. But now, humanity was no longer just defending, it was fighting back. The first wave of Earth's counterattacks was underway. In Tiabat, the skies above New York, fighter jets streaked through the air, their engines roaring as they dove toward the alien warships. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth's pilots had hope. The Imperial ships, though heavily armored and equipped with advanced technology, had no idea how humanity had managed to adapt so quickly. The pulse cannon had cracked their defenses, and now Earth's forces were armed with new weapons capable of bringing down their enemies. One squadron of jets, led by Captain Alan Pierce, was among the first to engage the alien ships. As they closed in on their target, Pierce gripped the controls of his fighter and focused. He had seen the destruction wrought by the alien invaders, and he wasn't about to let them destroy his world. "Focus fire on their engines," Pierce commanded. "Take them down before they have a chance to regroup." The jets fired a volley of missiles, and the alien ship's shields flickered before giving way. The missiles struck their target with precision, and a massive explosion erupted from the ship's engine room. For a brief moment, the Imperial ship seemed to falter, its once dominant presence now vulnerable. Captain Pierce's squadron wasn't the only one to strike. Across the globe, military units launched their own coordinated attacks, targeting the enemy ships and ground forces. But even as humanity fought back with everything they had, the Imperial fleet was regrouping. The Empire's command center was quick to react, sending reinforcements to the battlefields. The alien soldiers, relentless and brutal, fought fiercely to reclaim their lost ground. The battle raged on, with no side willing to yield. On the ground, Earth's forces were making headway against the alien invaders. General Keller watched as reports came in from across the world. His soldiers were pushing the alien forces back, but it wasn't enough. The Empire's reinforcements were arriving faster than expected. "We need to take out their command structure," Keller said, his voice filled with urgency. "If we cripple their leadership, the rest of their forces will fall apart." "Colonel," Trent nodded. "We've already identified the location of their central command on Earth. If we hit them hard enough, we might be able to end this conflict once and for all." The plan was set in motion. A special ops team, led by Captain Pierce, was tasked with infiltrating the alien stronghold deep within the heart of their territory. The team would need to move quickly and strike without hesitation. The fate of the war depended on their success. Meanwhile, the world's leaders held a meeting in a secure underground facility, far from the fighting. The President of the United States, along with leaders from Europe, Asia, and Africa, discussed their next move. The global alliance was holding together, but they knew the stakes were higher than ever. "We have no choice," the President said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We have to win this. For our children, for our future. We can't let the Empire take our world." The leaders nodded in agreement. They had seen the destruction, felt the fear, and now they had one goal: victory. As Earth's forces prepared for the final assault on the alien command, Captain Pierce and his team suited up, preparing for what could be their final mission. The alien stronghold was heavily guarded, but they had the element of surprise on their side. The team boarded their transport ship, their faces grim but resolute. They knew that if they failed, Earth's last hope would be extinguished. But failure wasn't an option. The transport ship lifted off, heading straight for the heart of the enemy's territory. The mission was simple: infiltrate the alien stronghold, eliminate the command center, and send a message to the Empire that Earth would never surrender. The fate of the world rested on their shoulders. The Earth's forces had finally gathered their strength after the first few days of the Imperial invasion. For the first time since the war began, there was a spark of hope. Humanity had managed to crack the alien fleet's defenses. And now, with Earth's military forces united across the globe, the tide was beginning to turn. Above Earth, in the endless expanse of space, the Imperial fleet continued to loom like an unstoppable force. The alien ships were powerful, but after the destruction of one of their dreadnoughts, the Empire had to rethink their approach. But even as they regrouped, Earth's forces had begun to rally their own resources: newly developed weapons, secret technologies, and the will to survive. Now the battle would be taken to the skies. At the United Nations Command Center, General David Keller stood before a map of the world, surrounded by his officers. The Imperial ships were still in orbit, but they had pulled back slightly, presumably, to reorganize. It was the moment Earth had been waiting for. "We can't wait any longer," David said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "The longer we let them regroup, the stronger they'll become. We need to strike now while they're still vulnerable." Colonel Marcus Trent, who had led many of the counterattacks on the ground, nodded. "Our space fleet is ready, but we'll need to be quick. The Imperial ships are still much larger and more heavily armed than our vessels." David looked at the glowing map on the screen in front of him, marking the location of the Imperial ships. They were concentrated in a large floating formation above Earth. But there was a weakness. Despite their size and power, the alien ships were slow to maneuver, and their communication systems were now slightly disoriented after the attack on their flagship. The window to strike was small, but it was there. "We won't beat them in a head-to-head battle," David said, scanning the screen. "But we can catch them off guard. We'll hit their weak points, their communication relays, the engine cores. If we disrupt their ability to coordinate, they won't be able to react." In Earth's orbit, the fleet of human warships prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Commander Alan Pierce, the leader of Earth's space forces, was overseeing the operation. His mission was simple: to take down the alien ships one by one, using every tool at their disposal. "We've got one shot at this," Pierce said to his crew as they moved into position. We've trained for this moment, we know what we're up against, now we take them down. The human fleet was smaller, consisting of a mix of military ships and civilian vessels retrofitted for battle. They didn't have the size or firepower of the Imperial fleet, but they had something more important: strategy, innovation, and sheer determination. All fighters prepare for launch, Pierce ordered, his voice calm but commanding. Keep your distance from the capital ships. We need to strike fast and get out before they know what hit them. As the fleet launched into space, Earth's fighters began to dart toward the alien formation. Their weapons were more advanced than the ones they had used just days before, thanks to the work of the scientists back on Earth. With the quantum pulse cannon disrupting the enemy's shields, Earth's forces now had a clear path to strike. Pierce's squadron, the lead fighters, moved into position. They were smaller, faster, and far more agile than the heavy Imperial warships. They used this advantage to get in close, targeting the alien ship's most vulnerable points. Their engines, their weapon systems, and their command centers were on their tail. Lieutenant Catherine Myers, a skilled pilot and second in command, reported over the comms. They're firing back, but they're slow. We're faster. Just stay on target. A loud roar echoed through the cockpit as a blast from an Imperial warship's main cannon missed by mere inches. The fighter jets weaved and ducked in a deadly game of cat and mouse, evading fire as they closed the distance. Fire now, Pierce commanded. The fighter squadron released their missiles in a precise attack on the enemy's engine core. The missiles found their mark, and the first Imperial ship erupted in a burst of fiery destruction. The humans watched as the alien ship fell out of formation, trailing smoke and debris. "We got one," Catherine said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "That's the first one down." But the victory was short-lived. The remaining Imperial ships were quick to retaliate. Massive energy beams shot from their weapons, tearing through the space around Earth's fleet. The human warships dodged as best they could, but the aliens were ruthless. Pierce's fighter squadron continued their attack, relentless in their pursuit. They were doing damage, but it was clear the battle was far from over. The Imperial fleet had more ships than Earth could hope to match, and their counterattacks were brutal. "We can't let up," Pierce shouted, barely able to hear himself over the roar of the ship's engines. "We need to keep going. We hit them hard, and we hit them now." The human fighters pressed on, aiming for the communication relays and weapons systems of the alien fleet. One by one, the Imperial ships began to falter, their shields weakening under the barrage of human firepower. But despite their best efforts, the alien warships kept coming. Back on Earth, General Keller watched from the command center as the space battle unfolded on the giant screens. The situation was tense, but the humans were holding their own. "We're making progress," Keller said, turning to his officers. "But it's not enough. We need to push harder." Colonel Trent nodded. "We've got the ground forces ready. We'll keep the pressure on the aliens while the space forces continue to engage." David looked at the screen, then back at the map. He knew this was the moment when everything would change. If humanity could break the alien fleet's command structure, they would win. But if the Empire could regroup, it would mean more destruction, more loss, and possibly Earth's final defeat. "We've fought hard to get here," David said, his eyes steely with resolve. "We're not backing down. This is our planet. We take it back today." The battle for Earth's skies continued, with each side gaining and losing ground in the deadly struggle. The Imperial fleet was relentless, but the humans were determined. As the fighters and warships clashed above Earth, it was clear humanity had found its strength, and it was not going to let the Empire take their world without one final, decisive fight. This is Part 5, which focuses on the battle between Earth's forces and the Imperial fleet in space. It's a turning point where humanity's tactics, determination, and newly developed technology start to make a difference against the seemingly invincible alien fleet. Let me know if you need any adjustments or additional details.